Welcome back, my sweet friends. Today we are going to be talking about the books that I read in July. I had a lot of fun reading this month. I read some really great books. My TBR, however, did not go very well. I had 7 books on my TBR for this month and I read 3 of them. Only 3, which is not ideal, but I will say one of the books that I didn't read on my TBR was The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson, and I just wanted to note that I have started this. I'm using a piece of scrap yarn for my bookmark. I have so many bookmarks, I don't know why I do this to myself, but I have started The Final Empire, so although I can't officially tick it off my TBR, I promise I'm reading this. I promise I am, but it's an honorable mention. Let's chat about the books that I read in July. The first book that I finished this month was Where Sleeping Girls Lie. This is the newest release by the author of Ace of Spades, which I read a couple years ago and really enjoyed. And I also really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. This is about Sade, who has a pretty traumatic past, but you don't really know what her past is until further into the book. You just know that she has some trauma, but she moves to this brand new boarding school, and not long after being there, one of the girls like in her class goes missing. And Sade is just like, I don't know if this can be a coincidence, like there's got to be something going on here. And so she kind of starts her own investigation. She's trying to figure out what's going on, and it's honestly really interesting. I read this in a reading vlog, so if you want to see like my full thoughts, I will link the reading vlog down below. I just really loved the setting and the writing. I liked that the characters had a lot of depth to them. I think my main like qualm with this book is that it is just too long. It is over 550 pages, and I just don't think a mystery needs to be that long personally, and it just kind of felt like the ending was really like dragged out, and I just didn't like that. Like I just felt like I was trying to get to the end for a really long time, and obviously in a mystery the whole point is like trying to figure out what's happening and like trying to get to the end where everything is explained, and I feel like the bit before the explanation of what was really happening and like getting all the secrets revealed was just too dragged out and too long, and like kind of made me lose interest a little bit. But overall I still really recommend it if you like A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, if you like Truly Devious, if you like those sorts of books, you'd probably really enjoy this. In the same reading vlog I also read Lessons in Chemistry by Garmus. This was incredible. It was so much better than I was expecting. This happens a lot to me when I read like general fiction, historical fiction, those sort of genres. I read the back of the book and it doesn't sound like amazing to me, and then I read it and I'm like, this is incredible. But I feel like if you are one of the people that is like, you know, like maybe I'll read it, but like it doesn't sound that good, it doesn't sound that interesting, read it. It made me so incredibly frustrated, which I definitely think is like the point, but it also made me so happy at certain parts. I felt so like attached to the characters. I just think it was written absolutely beautifully. I didn't even tell you what this is about. This book is about Elizabeth Zott. She is a chemist in the early 1960s where women were just not very valued. They were not seen as equals, and so the idea of being a woman in STEM was just, there was a lot of pushback, and she just has to fight again and again to just have a place in the world and be taken seriously. And there's a lot of things that go on in this book, but yeah, you're just following Elizabeth Zott as she just tries to live her life and just like have a job that she's passionate about chemistry, about science, and yeah, all the things that follow. It's way better than what I'm describing it as. I would really recommend this. This was a 4.5 star read for me, and I just, yeah, I absolutely loved it. Next up, I read these 2 books. So I did a reread of Powerless, and then I picked up Reckless, which was obviously a new release this month. First of all, obviously my reread of Powerless was absolutely phenomenal. It was 5 stars the first time I read it and 5 stars the second time I read it. I loved doing a reread. It was so fun to go back into this world and hang out with these characters. Like I just had such a great time. And then obviously I started Reckless. This is in a reading vlog as well, so I'll link this down below if you want to hear like my full thoughts, because I feel like I really just like talked so much about this book in that reading vlog and really just like fleshed out all of my thoughts and opinions. But overall I really enjoyed this book. However, I was let down. I went into this book being like, this is going to be 5 stars, and maybe that's my own fault for going in with really high expectations, but I was so sure this was going to be a 5-star read for me, and it just wasn't. If we're going to make a pros and cons list, in the pros section I would say great romance, great witty banter, great dialogue. In the cons column, I would say the plot in this book was so disappointing. It was so lackluster. It was such a letdown. I think I said this in my reading vlog. I feel like the romance and the banter was 5 stars, but I feel like the plot was like 2 or 3 stars. And so overall, I ended up giving it 4 stars, which is still a fantastic rating because I did have fun. I did enjoy my time. I tabbed it, I underlined quotes, I was like giggling and kicking my feet at some parts of it. But just overall, I went in with such high expectations, and I just feel like like this wasn't up to those expectations, and I really, really, really dislike the term bridging book. There are so many series that I've read where the second book is fantastic and it can stand on its own and it has a great plot, and so I don't think using the excuse, oh, I just needed a bridging book, is valid. That's just my opinion. If you disagree, that's so fine. But those are my thoughts on this. I am very, very, very excited for the third book, and I'm really hoping there's a bit of like a redemption for my thoughts on this series, because I still think it can be a 5-star series for me. However, right after picking up Reckless, I also picked up A Novel Love Story by Ashley Poston. 5 stars. 5 freaking stars. I loved this book so much, and there are definitely a lot of people who didn't love this book, which is so fine, so valid, but I think I just read this book at the perfect time. I absolutely loved my reading experience. Like, I was just having the best time. I was giggling, I was laughing. I just felt like the premise of this book was executed so well. In this book we are following Eileen, and she is on the way to her like annual book club retreat, reading retreat that she does every year with her best friends, and it's a bit of a road trip, so she is driving there, and her car breaks down in this small town, and she ends up having to stay there for a little while her car gets fixed and whatever else is happening. But she quickly realizes that this is not just some random small town. This is the small town that her favorite book takes place in. Like, she has somehow magically fallen into her favorite book series, her favorite small town book series. So all of the people that she's meeting in the town are actually characters from her favorite book, and all of the places that she's going, like the coffee shop and the mechanic and the bookshop and all of those things, are actually like locations in the setting of her favorite book. And it is just so magical and so perfect, and like a little bit cheesy in the way that small town romances are cheesy, but like also in the best way possible. Like, it was just perfect to me. It was exactly what I wanted from this book and from this premise, because when I heard the premise of this book, I was like, that sounds literally phenomenal. Like, I hope that the author can like pull it off, and to me, she definitely did. I had so much fun. I will be recommending it to everyone. Like, it was just such a great time. And I also picked up Dishonestly Yours by Krista and Becca Ritchie. This is the start of their new series. If you don't know, Krista and Becca Ritchie are also the author of the Addicted Calloway Sister series, which I love and adore with my entire heart. And so I was really excited when they said they were coming out with a brand new series. This one follows a family who are involved in like con artistry. It's really following like 2 families, I guess, and the mums of those families are best friends, and they are just really great con artists. But the daughters from both of these parents are also best friends, because they've like grown up together because their mums are best friends, and they have decided that they are done and they just like don't want to live this lifestyle anymore. They don't want to live a life of deceit and just like sneakiness. They just want to be normal girls. So they decide to run away from their families and move to like a small college town and just be normal girls. But the brother of one of the girls has found out that they are running away and that they're trying to leave the family business, and so he follows them to try and convince them to come back, basically. And of course, there's a romance between the brother of one of the girls and the other girl. So it's like best friend's brother trope, I guess. And honestly, I had a lot of fun with this. I gave it 3.5 stars because it was a bit like lusty to me, like the actual romance. It's just like not my personal like type of thing when it comes to romance. But I loved the whole like con artist, that whole situation. And I also loved that we got to meet all of these new characters in this new college town. And I loved following them like working their normal jobs and like creating a life for themselves. Like, that side of the plot was really interesting to me. It was just like the romance wasn't great, but I would still recommend it. And I think I said this in the reading vlog, but I think it could be a series that I grow to love over time as I get more attached to the characters, because I think it's going to probably have a really great found family if it's anything like the Addicted Calloway Sister series. But right now I'm just like not there yet, so TBD on this one. I think it could be a really great series long term, but just like right now I'm not attached enough, you know. Now we get into the books that were not in any reading vlogs. So one of the books that I picked up this month as my like before bed book, I like to read like chill romances before going to sleep, or anything that just doesn't take a lot of like thought, I guess. Like, I don't love to read anything super complicated or super like heavy before I go to sleep, because I just feel like I can't sleep, and this was perfect for that. So this is Fragile Sanctuary by Cowles. She actually sent me this beautiful special edition of it. I'm quite simply obsessed with it. I love having it on display. This is the first book in a small town romance series called Sparrow Falls, and we are following Rhodes and Anson. And Rhodes had a really traumatic thing happen to her when she was in her early teenage years, and she lost her whole family, and so she kind of got like adopted into this other family. And this family that she got adopted into is basically just like full of like foster kids almost. Like it's just made up of all of these different kids from all these different families and all these different situations. And I think each book in the standalone series is going to follow one of the kids from this like foster family, which I really love the idea of that. I definitely want to continue the series. Anyway, we're following Rhodes, who is one of the kids in this family that has now grown up, and she is restoring this old home. And one of her like foster brothers, adopted brothers, is kind of like heading up this whole restoration, renovation situation. And that brother also has one of his best friends, Anson, helping doing this building process. And so Anson is this like grumpy, standoffish guy, and then we also have Rhodes, who is pretty friendly, and there's a bit of like forced proximity because obviously he's working on her house and she is just like continually being nice to him, and he's kind of just like, why do you keep being nice to me? And they fall in love, obviously. But it also has a suspense element to it, which was crazy. Like it was so bizarre. A lot of Catherine Cowles books, or maybe all of them, have this like suspense romance situation, and I wouldn't go into it just for the suspense element because it's never like a super complex, super well developed like thriller mystery storyline, but it does make the romance so interesting and gives a lot more like plot to the romance. So I always honestly really enjoy it, but sometimes I'm like, oh, this did come a little bit like out of nowhere. Like this wasn't like hinted at or wasn't like foreshadowed very well, but I still really enjoy it, and I still think they're just like a fun, silly, goofy time, you know? I ended up rating this 3.5 stars. It was a great small town romance, and I think I will be continuing the series because I just had a great time. I randomly decided to pick up Defy the Night by Brigid Kemerer. Honestly, I feel like I don't remember this book super well because it didn't really like stay with me, I guess. Like I have not thought about this book once since I finished it, but I did enjoy reading it. This book is about Tessa and her best friend Weston, who are living in like, I guess kind of like the slums of the kingdom. So there's like a castle and a kingdom and like royals, and then there are like the slums and the streets, you know? And so they live in the streets, and I think there's some sort of like disease that this whole kingdom is dealing with, and there's like not enough medicine to go around. It's kind of confusing to explain. Like it makes a lot of sense when you read it, but Tessa and Weston are kind of doing this like Robin Hood situation where they like steal from the rich to give to the poor, but like with medication, if I'm remembering correctly. Please forgive me if I'm getting any of the details incorrect. I'm so sorry if I am, but yeah, they're trying to kind of like disperse this like medication to the people in the streets, and then something happens to Weston. Tessa ends up in the castle, and lots of things are happening. I don't want to say anything more because I don't want to spoil anything, because there's like a bit of like a plot twist, I guess. I think it just felt like too many other fantasy books that I have read, so I would recommend it. Like I enjoyed it, but again, it didn't stick with me. It hasn't been something that I've thought about since, but I want to know, does this series get better? Because I think it's a trilogy. Should I continue it? Is it worth it? Or is it kind of like, oh, it's fine? If you love this series, convince me to continue it, because at this moment I'm not like, I don't know, there's just like so many other books that I would rather read instead. So didn't love this, didn't hate it. 3.75 stars. Like it was a good time, but yeah. I also picked up Trial of the Sun Queen, and this was honestly kind of fun. Some people love this book, some people hate this book, and I really didn't know how I was going to feel about it based on what people told me. And you know what? I had a fun time. I really enjoyed this. I do think I went in with the right expectations. Like I kind of just went in being like, I think this is just going to be a bit of like a silly, goofy time. Like I'm not going in expecting incredible world building, really in-depth characters and like magic systems, and like it's no Brando Sando, you know what I'm saying? But it is just like a fun romantasy read. This was pitched to me as like a grown-up version of The Selection, and that's exactly what it is. It's basically about 10 women who go into a contest to become the next queen. Like the prince is choosing who he wants to be his next queen, and so they have to go through a series of trials and like competitions in order to become the queen, and like you can get eliminated or you might die during the trials. Like lots of bad things can happen to you, but if you win, you become the next queen, and you obviously live a life of luxury in the castle. And there's also like magical things involved in becoming the queen as well. And our main girl lives in basically like a slave camp. I'm laughing because some people compare it to another book that has a similar premise, and I can see the parallels. But yeah, she's like a prisoner in this like slave camp where everyone's treated really awfully, and she basically just gets taken out of it one day and they're like, you're gonna compete in these trials. Sound familiar? Maybe. And there's some like political reason why she is now partaking in this competition, and everyone else in the competition is like very well trained, has been like raised in preparation for these trials, and so she is very ill-equipped in comparison to the other girls in this competition. But yeah, I feel like that's like the premise of the story. It's honestly really interesting. Like, I loved reading about the trials. I had a lot of fun reading about the characters and like the romance. It's a bit of a, you think it's gonna go one way and then it might not go that way kind of situation. And you know what? I think I'm gonna continue the series, which I'm just shocked that like out of all the fantasy books that I read this month, this is the one that really like I had the most fun with. But again, I think it was just because I wasn't taking it too seriously. It was just like a fun little romantasy read. Again, I'm not like really invested in the magic system and in the world building and in all the politics. Like, I'm just there to have a good time. 4 stars for Trial of the Sun Queen. I guess we'll see what happens in the next book. A lot of people said the next book is even better, so we'll see. And then I picked up Two Twisted Crowns, and here's the thing. I picked up this book because I was like, I haven't really read that many books on my TBR this month. This book is on my TBR, I should pick it up. But I was definitely like not in the mood to pick it up, and that is completely on me. Like, I should not have read it when I wasn't in the mood, because I think I really ruined my reading experience by like forcing myself to read a book that I was not in the mood for, which just goes to show, if you don't want to read a book, don't force yourself to read it, because it's not worth it. You're probably gonna not have as much fun as you would if you were reading it when you were in the mood for it, and I wish I had waited until I was in the mood. In saying that, the storyline was great, the characters were great, the romance was great. I also just don't know if I cared that much about the like other storyline that was going on, because we follow the characters from the first book, but then we also follow almost like a second plot line in the second book as well with 2 other characters, and it was interesting, but it just like, I wasn't as connected to those characters as I was the characters that we read about in the first book. I gave it 4 stars because I still really enjoyed it, but I think I could have enjoyed it more at a different point in time. So that is why we mood read. I also picked up Little Women by Lousia May Alcott, and I loved this. I had such a great time reading this book. I'm so glad that I picked it up. I can't believe I'm explaining the premise of Little Women, like it's literally a classic. But I would say this book is like historical fiction. Basically, we are following 4 sisters in the Civil War? Yeah, the Civil War in New England. So you're following these 4 sisters, and they all have very different dreams and aspirations and very different personalities. So you get to just see how their lives unfold, because you are following them through many, many years. You see them get older, you see some like romances take place, you see careers happen. It is literally just following their lives for many years of their life. I would say it is definitely not like a plot driven book. Like, there is not like one main plot or purpose. It is very much like slice of life, very slow paced for the most part. But I just became so attached to these characters. If you don't know, I've never read Little Women before. I've never seen the movie, so I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I just became so attached to these girls. I read it quite slowly, and I'm so glad that I did that, because I feel like I really just like took it all in and really just spent a lot of time in this world and with these characters, and I just fell in love with them. I really did. I loved that they were all so different. I was also not expecting this to be so sad. Like, who was gonna tell me that I was gonna cry in this book? I did not expect that. Was I happy with how all of the storylines like panned out in the end? No, I wasn't. There were certain things that I wish had happened that didn't happen, and there were also some things that I wish didn't happen that did happen. But also, that's literally just life, isn't it? Like, things just don't go to plan all the time, and sometimes the characters that you want to end up together don't end up together, and it's really sad. But yeah, I had a great time with this. 4.5 stars, maybe 5 stars if I continue thinking about it, because I have already like thought about it a lot since. Also, I will say this book is a classic, so it is very outdated. The views and like the expectations of the women in this book are very outdated. So by giving this book a high rating, that doesn't mean that I like agree with everything that happens in this book, obviously. I feel like I have to say that because I know I'm just gonna get a comment being like, what? That book is so like gender roles and like women weren't appreciated. Yes, but that's historical fiction. Like, that's how historical fiction works, and this was what life was like at this point in time. But I really enjoyed this. So glad that I read it. Guys, look what I finally finished. I started this book 2 months ago. 2 months ago. I read, I think, about 40% of it 2 months ago, and then I took a break because this book is so heavy. Like, the emotional toll that these books take on me is just, it's just a lot. I need to be in a mentally good space to pick up these books because they just take so much out of me. Like, I would never expect like a romance series like this to so heavily affect me, but they really, really do. So I really hesitate to recommend these books because I feel like they put me in a really sad mood. Like, they make me really, really sad. They are not uplifting, happy books at all. They are full of like trauma and difficult things. However, the connection that you get to the characters and the way that you love them so deeply and the way that you are rooting for these characters so passionately, and the way I was just like praying for a happy ending for these characters was a little bit dramatic of me. This is ink on paper. These characters aren't real, but the way these characters feel to me, they are my friends. They are my friends, and I don't want anything bad to happen to them. And so many bad things have happened to them, and it makes me physically feel sick. Do what you will with that information. I just want to say I'm proud of myself for also finishing this because it is 900 pages. 900. And you know what? I read 60% of this book in maybe like 2 or 3 days. Like, I could not stop reading it once I picked it up again. And I have been thinking about these characters every single day since finishing this book, which also makes me think I will start Taming 7 very soon because I just need to get back in this world already. Like, as much as it feels like it gave me literal emotional trauma, I do need to be back with these characters ASAP. I do. And again, I know I'm being dramatic. Like, I really don't care. Like, I am dramatic and I will continue to be dramatic, especially when it comes to books, but I was just so shocked at how much emotion this evoked from me and how deeply I care for these characters. I love them so much. I really do. So I think it is a 5-star because yeah, I originally thought I was going to give it 4.5 stars, but I literally have not stopped thinking about these characters. So I think it might be 5 stars. I think keeping 13 and then redeeming 6 have been my favorite from the series, probably because you get happy endings in those books and you don't get happy endings in the other ones, and that just literally shatters my soul. Do with that information what you will. Decide if you want to put yourself through the emotional trauma. I also feel like some people just don't love these books, which is so valid, but I do have an unhealthy attachment to these characters in this book. I do. Oh my gosh, I definitely forgot to mention some of the books that I read on my Kindle. So the first book I read on my Kindle was Summer Romance by Annabel Monaghan, and I gave this one 4.5 stars. It was so good. I feel like her writing kind of reminds me of Abby Jimenez or Emily Henry, so if you like those authors, I would really recommend this. I definitely need to read the other books that Annabel Monaghan, I forget, this author has written. This one was about a woman who is going through a divorce, and she's also a mother, so this is like the first time she has been single in a really long time, and she meets this guy and she's kind of like, I really like this guy, but I also am going through a divorce. Like, this is probably not a good time. I feel like I shouldn't get into anything serious, but maybe this can be a happy little summer romance. And so that's kind of like what she goes into this situation thinking. There's so much more to this book than just the romance, but I also just loved the love interest in this book. He was so supportive and so caring, but also like gave her space when she needed it. Like, he was fantastic. And again, I really need to read the other books that this author has written because this was absolutely phenomenal. And also on my Kindle, I read Next to You by Bonem Young, and I liked this one. It wasn't my favorite that I've read by her. Definitely wasn't as good as Out on a Limb, which is my favorite by Bonem Young, but this one follows Lane and Matt, and they are in the same friendship group. Some of their friends are like dating each other, so it's like a big friendship group, and there's like a few couples in there, and they are both like the single ones in the friend group, and so their friends are like always trying to set them up together, but they're like, no, we're just friends. And Matt is a mechanic and Lane is a graphic designer, and they kind of make a deal because Lane buys a bus that she wants to like renovate and make it into like almost like an RV caravan type of situation, like build it in and like live in it. And so her and Matt make a deal where she will help him with all of the graphic design stuff and like logos and stuff for his mechanic business, and he can help her renovate her bus. So obviously they're spending a lot of time together, and it's just a really cute friends to lovers romance. There was some really sweet scenes in this book, especially when Lane was spending time with Matt's family. Like, I loved that like part of the book so much. Overall, it wasn't like a romance that like stood out to me a lot. Like I said, there were scenes in it that I really loved, and I also just thought Matt was so wonderful and so sweet, and the guys in all of Bonem Young's books are just incredible. But overall, it wasn't something that I think I'll think about like super often afterwards. So I think I gave it like 3.75. Like, it was a good read and I would recommend it. Probably a bit more like lusty than I would normally like. Like, I wish it was a bit less focused on like the physical side of their relationship, because I feel like that was like a big focus. But like the whole friendship side of their relationship was so beautiful, and they had like such a deep emotional connection, which I really, really loved. And lastly, I actually read 2 non-fiction books this month, which slay for me because I don't normally read a lot of non-fiction. The first one is Garden City by John Mark Comer, and John Mark Comer has quickly become one of my favorite Christian non-fiction authors. I've read a couple books by him now, but I want to like honestly go through his whole backlist. But Garden City just focuses on how we can work and rest well. Like, obviously as humans, God has designed us to work, but he has also designed us to rest. And like, what does that look like, and how do we do those things well? So overall, it's just about like living, really. Just like living life as a Christian. How can we do that a little bit better? Which a lot of his books are just about that, but in different ways. And I really loved this, and I would really recommend it. I don't rate nonfiction, but I would recommend anything by John Mark Comer. He is, again, like I said, one of my favorite Christian authors. And then the other book that I read was ADHD 2.0. This was recommended by my therapist. We can all make our own conclusions as to why. I don't know how else to describe this book than saying it is about ADHD and about more of like a modern understanding of ADHD. I liked this. I thought it was interesting, but also it's my first book about this subject, so I feel like I have nothing to compare it to and nothing to like say on the topic. So again, do with that what you will. I enjoyed it. It was good. I will be reading more books about this topic so that I can understand it better, and maybe I'll have more to say when I read more books. But those are all of the books that I read in July and all of my thoughts and opinions. Hopefully you guys found a new book that you want to read based on my recommendation, or maybe you just wanted to see if I agreed with your opinions on certain books. And if I did, that's so fun. And if I didn't, that's also so fun, because we love having different opinions. I would love to hear what your favorite book that you read in July was, because I'm always looking for new recommendations. I'm always wanting to add books to my mental TBR and my physical TBR. But I love you guys so, so much, and I will see you in my next video very soon. Goodbye.